When the sun comes up on America, across open fields, small towns, and city streets, a new day begins. And here, we rise with it. This is where hard work meets headlines, where truth matters, and America wakes up informed.
An interesting week.
They all are.
This is your country. This is your morning. This is Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. America, let's do it together.
Love you, Ivy.
Love you too.
And it starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy on this Monday morning edition of Daybreak. Thanks so much for joining us. And here are three big things you need to know. One, the United States is set to impose tough new sanctions on Iran. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he'll hold a news conference today to lay out the economic pressures the administration plans to impose on Iran and its key allies. The White House described the measures as the toughest sanctions in history. Number two, the Massachusetts murder trial of Lindsay Clancy could go to jury this week. The prosecution is expected to call more rebuttal witnesses after the defense rested its case on Friday. Clancy has admitted to strangling her three young children in 2023. She has pleaded not guilty because of postpartum psychosis and has attracted a whole slew of mentally unstable supporters around the country. And three, a new study has found links between recreational drug use and stroke risks. Cocaine was tied to nearly double the risk of stroke, amphetamines with more than double the risk, and cannabis a 37% increase. The study was done by researchers at the University of Cambridge, a study involving more than 100 million people. Were they all taking recreational drugs? That's the first question I have about that survey. That's where we start hour one of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for being alongside. Steve, Ivy out today. Should be back with you tomorrow. They went to the bullpen the last moment for the right-hander. That's me, Scott Bertram, here on Hillsdale College's campus, where I serve as general manager of the award-winning student radio station, WRFH, also lecturer in journalism. I teach in our journalism department, and I'm director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. Find everything at podcast.hillsdale.edu. Pleased and privileged, as always, to be filling in for Steve and Ivy. Find me on X at Scott Bertram. That's SCOT, 1T, BERTRAM, or scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. You'll find me guest hosting a number of places, most specifically here for Steve and Ivy on Daybreak. I also host the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale K-12 Classical Education Podcast, Political Beats over at National Review, Future of Freedom with Franklin News Foundation, Wasn't That Special, a podcast about Saturday Night Live. So I host a few things. You can find me out and about, and I would encourage you to follow on X at Scott Bertram. Coming up this hour, Mary Holland with us. She's president of Children's Health Defense. And then Joel Griffith with us from Americans Advancing Freedom. We'll talk about the economy and now $40 trillion in debt. Not great. Not great. President Trump was out and about on Friday at a rally in South Carolina and stumping for his choice there, Darlene Graham, in the U.S. Senate runoff to come. But it could be a preview of the way the president is campaigning for candidates around the country as we get close to the November midterm election. I want to hear from the president, and then I've got something to say about the president and the upcoming midterm. But this is President Trump on Friday. We'll start with cut 3. President Trump telling us communism is the country's greatest threat. This is President Trump on Friday.
But communism is the single greatest threat to our country in history, including World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, 9/11. And that's why we're going to crush the radical Democrats at the ballot box this November. And we're going to defeat communism in America once and for all. We're going to defeat it. It's never worked. It's dirty. It's filthy. It's unhappy. Did you ever see a happy communist? You ever see a communist laugh? I never saw it. I've known communists. They don't laugh. They're very unhappy people. We want to be happy. with your vote for Darlene on Tuesday.
In fact, thinking of Yakov Smirnov, the famed Soviet comedian, and he was not a communist. He was more of a free market kind of guy. He was funny, though. He's a comedian. President Trump, again on Friday, talking about the slate of candidates Democrats are running this time around and what might happen if they win. This is cut number 7 from Friday night. President Trump.
If we lose, you're going to lose your border. You're going to lose your tax cuts. You're going to lose everything that we've done. We've gotten the biggest tax cuts in history. Think about no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security for our seniors, no tax on overtime. All of that's going to be gone. Your taxes are going to go up. Your pay is going to go down. Your jobs are going to be lost. They're going to end up closing up. Your businesses are going to flee just like they did years ago. They're going to flee our country. I'm going to be impeached. They're going to impeach me. They have no idea why.
He continued along the impeachment path for a while, talking about that on Friday. President Trump for Darlene Graham. Now, this is a Republican runoff to run in the general election in November, and President Trump has endorsed Darlene Graham. That's why he's there in South Carolina. But the message that you heard, and one that I imagine he'll continue to deliver, is one that is a general election message. What will happen if radical Democrats take power in the House and perhaps even the Senate? And it got me thinking. President Trump is 80 years old. President Trump has 2 years left at his presidential term. He'll be 82 at that point, 86 by the next time the presidential election rolls around in 2032. Is this the last significant election in which President Trump will play an oversized role? I wonder about that. And if so, and either way, but especially if so, can he be convinced? Can he be encouraged that this is perhaps the most important election that he might have a hand in? He has 2 more years left in his term, and it's always difficult for a term-limited president to operate in the back half of a second term. Now, if you complicate matters by having a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, well, very little will get done. Might there be a U.S. Supreme Court opening over these next 2 years? Well, it's possible. We've heard about Justice Alito maybe stepping down. If Democrats take the Senate, it will be next to impossible, virtually impossible, to have a nominee confirmed in the back half of a second term. And President Trump very accurately describes the stakes of this election in those clips we heard. These are the most radical Democratic candidates that we've seen in my lifetime, certainly. Abdul al-Sayed and others, socialists in Florida. I was wrong about Hong in Wisconsin. I wasn't alone. I thought for sure she'd win the primary, but there were enough anti-Hong votes to win. But surprise, surprise, a socialist wins in Florida. You have radical Democratic candidates. You have the far left of the party, the socialists and the communists who are taking party and controlling messaging. They will be in charge. Democrats win the House and Senate. That's a very dangerous situation. So I'd encourage maybe those close to President Trump, talk to him. And they probably already have. But this is his opportunity to have one more big impact on an election and perhaps maintain Republican control of the Senate, at least, if not the House. More next here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Monday morning. Thanks so much for being alongside. Find me on X at Scott Bertram. You can find the show there at Steve Gruber Show and stevegruber.com for all sorts of information and the podcasts from the program as well after the program is done. So I get up on Monday morning, this morning, as I do every morning when I fill in, and try to find out what I missed. Morning guys, a little behind the curtain, have different ways of prepping. Some people like to stay up really, really late and then get up close to showtime and just pick up bits and pieces. Some people like to go to bed really, really early, get up super early, and then do the prep. So I'm basically a stay up late guy, get up, fairly, not fairly close, but I don't have hours before the show starts. I have generally 45 minutes or so before the show starts to figure out what I missed and start plotting things. I've done a lot of the work the night before. So I get up and I, tool around to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal and places and see what I've missed. And of course, conservative sites as well. But sometimes the places where you find the best fodder, of course, are on the more left-wing sites. And this morning I'm over at the New York Times and I see a story. It says IPAC wants to back this Republican, but he has some reservations. This is interesting. The pro-Israel group has been preparing to spend big for Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee for Senate in Michigan. Does he want that? Question mark. And I read this and I figure out, this is not good journalism. This is not a solid story. I've got to talk about this today. Minutes ago, I'm over on X, my boss here at Hillsdale, John J. Miller, who runs our Dow journalism program. You can read him over at the Wall Street Journal, where he writes for Free Expression. He posts about 10 minutes ago about this same story in the New York Times with the same reservations I have. And I think, I'm on the right track here. All right, so what's wrong with this story? First of all, you can look at a story on its face and say, that makes no sense to me. You are savvy media consumers. You know what the New York Times is trying to do. And so, first of all, you look and say, the American Israeli Political Action Committee, IPAC, wants to back Mike Rogers. He has some reservations. This is in Michigan, the U.S. Senate race, Mike Rogers against the anti-Semite Abdul al-Sayed, and the socialist Abdul al-Sayed. And it's okay to say, why would Mike Rogers refuse money from an organization, A, trying to help him win, and B, an organization that likely has the ear of some of the people in Michigan, some of the voters in Michigan he is working hardest to flip. That is Jewish Democrats. Mike Rogers is trying to appeal to those Democrats for Rogers, who are completely disgusted by what they see from Abdul al-Sayed. And here comes this organization with millions of dollars to help him do that. And Rogers says, oh, no, please don't spend money on me. Some of the far left fringe anti-Semites don't like IPAC, so I don't want to offend them. What? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So you can say at its face, the story makes no sense to me. Now, maybe there's some incredible reporting in here and news and details that really shine a light on the situation. All right, let's see very quickly. When a super PAC offers to spend millions of dollars on a political candidate's behalf, the candidate's typically grateful. Not so in the Senate battleground of Michigan, where the big spending American Israel Public Affairs Committee has encountered some resistance, an indicator of the organization's deepening image problems because of its staunch support for Israel. IPAC, a powerful pro-Israel lobbying group that is facing growing animosity in the Democratic Party from progressive critics of Israel, has spent weeks preparing to start an ad campaign to support Mike Rogers, but Mr. Rogers and some of his allies are wavering on the effort intended to help him, worrying that those millions of dollars could backfire politically if done so publicly. Well, how did they get this information? Well, the New York Times cites two people briefed on the situation who spoke on the condition of anonymity to disclose sensitive conversations. And as you read deeper into this story, you realize it is two sides. One, people on the record denying it and saying it's not true, and sources who need to be anonymous to talk to the New York Times, who won't go on the record, won't put their name behind a statement saying, oh, no, there's big trouble. There's animosity. There's problems. That's the crux of the story. You've got anonymous people saying there's problems, anonymous people saying that there was a meeting, anonymous people saying Rogers says, please don't spend tens of millions of dollars supporting my campaign trying to appeal to Jewish Democrats who don't want to vote for Abdul al-Sayed. Here's on the record in the story. An IPAC spokeswoman, quote, the Rogers campaign has been explicit with us that they welcome support from IPAC and our members. A Rogers campaign advisor on the record. We have support from the Jewish and pro-Israel community. We want that support and will continue to welcome and are proud to have any and all support from the pro-Israel community and IPAC community. The New York Times reporting even, Mr. Rogers attended 3 IPAC-hosted fundraisers in Los Angeles on Sunday. Another is planned for Monday. The guy who doesn't want to be associated with IPAC and is saying, please don't spend money on me and support me in this campaign, is attending 4 fundraisers for the organization in Los Angeles. They further point out that candidates cannot control the actions of a super PAC. So even if the reporting is true, or if it is true, what are they insinuating some potential violations by Mike Rogers in coordination with IPAC? They say, oh, he has to be very careful about how he could talk to an outside group like IPAC to avoid running afoul of coordination laws. There's someone else on the record. Patrick Dorton, a spokesman for the United Democracy Project, said IPAC's board was unequivocal in its goal of defeating Abdul al-Sayed and that it was putting every viable option on the table, including United Democracy Project, to help achieve that objective. So you've got all sorts of fishiness happening here. The people who are on the record are saying it's not true and it's not a story. And the Times is relying on people off the record, not off the anonymous quotes, anonymous sources, people who won't put their name behind a quote to poke holes in the people who are on the record. And on its face, again, you're a savvy media consumer. Does it make sense for Mike Rogers to decline the support of an organization that will help him garner votes from people in Michigan who are most likely to flip from D to R in the ballot box in November? Or next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program this morning. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy. They should be back with you tomorrow morning for the Tuesday edition of the program. It is opening week here at Hillsdale College. Students arrived over the weekend, new freshmen here on campus over the weekend. Classes start on Wednesday. I begin teaching on Thursday. It's an exciting time, the beginning of a new semester. I probably will spend a few minutes talking about that later on in today's program, the start of a new school year. I can't believe it. It is the beginning of my 11th year teaching classes here at Hillsdale College, and time has absolutely flown in the best way possible. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Ghost Bed. Ghost Bed. You might not remember every time you toss or turn or wake up hot, but your body does. That's why you wake up tired before the day even starts. Ghost Bed can help cure those problems. Engineered to help reduce the reasons your sleep gets interrupted. Designed to relieve pressure, help regulate temperature, and support your body. With cooling technology built into every mattress and made in the USA. Ghost Bed has a 101-night sleep trial. You can try it at home. The real test of a mattress is how you feel in the morning. So that's more than 3 months worth of a test of GhostBed. You'll probably know in the first 10 days. If you're waking up sore or tired before the day even starts, check out GhostBed. And for a limited time during GhostBed's Labor Day sale, they're offering this fine audience an extra 10% off their lowest prices of the season. Go to ghostbed.com/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber. That's ghostbed.com/Gruber and promo code Gruber to grab yourself a ghost bed. And then you'll find out what fine sleep is really all about. You'll have 101 nights to try it out, but you probably won't need 10% of that to know that Ghost Bed will work for you. Ghostbed.com/Gruber and promo code Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in on this Monday morning, getting your week started on the right foot, we hope. Joined right now by Mary Holland, Esquire. She's president of Children's Health Defense, been involved in the health freedom movement for more than 2 decades. Previously served as CHD's general counsel, also a part of a new film, dutytodisobeyfilm.com, to find out more there. On X at Mary Holland NYC, a whole lot we could talk about today. Mary, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Great to be here.
I appreciate the time this morning. First, there were so many revelations coming out around Dr. Fauci and what we knew from some of his messaging and diary and this and that. One of those things that I know popped for a day, but perhaps has been overlooked, is this revelation, this text exchange with Dr. Fauci about pregnant women and the COVID vaccine. Since that revelation, have we found more about what Dr. Fauci knew or what this vaccine, the danger posed perhaps to pregnant women?
Well, he knew very early on and exchanged messages with the head of the CDC and the Surgeon General that there was likely a risk in the first trimester after the second shot, in particular, first and second trimesters. There'd be a cytokine storm. It's like a challenge, re-challenge effect. And in fact, we know that there was a very high miscarriage rate. And some people in the public, I guess Bill Ackman in particular, he and his wife suffered 7 miscarriages during that period. They had gotten the COVID shots. It's terrifying for people to understand that Fauci lied through his teeth, as Senator Ron Johnson has said. I guess it was no surprise to those of us at Children's Health Defense. We had published with Bobby Kennedy as the author, The Real Anthony Fauci. And so we knew, having worked on a meticulous book with 3,000 citations, that this man lies and he's really a pawn of pharma and he incubates new drugs. That's what he does. That's how he used the National Institutes of Health. So for us, it wasn't a surprise, but I think for many people, these are revelations. And I hope that it's really giving them a new skepticism about claims by government and industry about health.
It is one of the side effects of COVID that people perhaps have a new skepticism about science, and people have lost trust in the science, quote unquote. And this is a great example because you would expect a trusted doctor, a physician, to simply give you the truth, to say, look, we believe that this is what they believe, that this vaccine will help prevent the spread of COVID. However, we know that there are some potential complications. You should take this information and make the best choice for you and your family. That's nothing close to the messaging we got during the COVID vaccines.
No, I mean, I think one of the things that's revealed in these private new messages from Dr. Fauci that have come out and from his diaries, so called, but we've also been seeing this in the Freedom of Information Act exchanges that have been coming out for years. They didn't care about people's health, full stop. What they cared about was overcoming vaccine hesitancy and getting everybody in the world to take these experimental gene therapies. I mean, that was the objective. And clearly, there were public private partnerships between the pharmaceutical industry and government to push these shots. And you'll remember Bill Gates, who's in the thick of this, saying, nobody's safe until everybody's safe. And
Hmm.
almost everybody on the planet has to take one of these shots, which in and of itself is insane, right? This is an absolutely new technology. They pushed it out within 1 year. Any vaccine before that with much older technology took at least 10 years to
Hmm.
make ready for the market. The whole premise was insane. And yet, with the fear, with the propaganda, with the censorship, millions, billions of people took these shots.
Talking with Mary Holland, president of Children's Health Defense. You can find them online. Mary's on X at Mary Holland NYC. And there is another question coming up, a deadline in January for the Navy flu mandate. Tell us about what's happening here.
Well, it's been the case for decades that in the military there was a mandate for flu shots. Sad to say, Scott, it's nothing new that the military is subjected to a lot of medical interventions. They suffered the COVID mandate first before the civilian population. So they had lifted the flu mandate and now have reinstated it, which is troubling. And many people are very concerned that now the FDA, under new leadership, has approved a gene therapy flu shot, Mflusiva, for people over 50. So that at this moment can't be mandated for the military, but there are questions about it. We actually have a lawsuit right now against the Secretary of War in his official capacity, Hegseth, about religious exemptions. We believe that there needs to be a real process in the military for religious exemptions. We saw during COVID, and we
Hmm.
portray in this film you mentioned, Duty to Disobey, that the process didn't work at all. It was illegal in the Navy in particular. They just had a bogus process to reject every single request for religious accommodation. They're required to have a real process for religious accommodation under the First Amendment and under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that applies to the military. So there's a lot to change, but actually, I have to say, it was Congress, remarkably, that actually ended the COVID mandate in the military. And we know that, again, the film Duty to Disobey, which will be available on Roku very soon for a small
Hmm.
fee, that film really shows us that once they rolled out the shots in the military, there were horrific signals about what the harm that was happening, strokes, cancer, deaths, that were happening right away. And then there was apparently manipulation of the data in the epidemiological database for the military.
Mary, there's a conference coming up with Children's Health Defense. You can find more at chdconference.org. It's September 17th in Washington, D.C. Tell us a bit more about what is happening at the conference and what people can expect if they attend.
Thank you. Yes, it's a 1 day conference, 8 to 4, and then a dinner, the Defender Dinner, to honor Senator Ron Johnson, who has truly been our champion on vaccine related issues and COVID corruption. But we'll be having speakers of Senator Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, Representative Paul Gosar, critical journalists. We'll be having people really speak to showcasing the good work that Congress is doing. Finally, it's taken decades to get here, but there is some really good work being done in Congress. And we'll be talking about the media environment, Scott, that's so important. We were so horrifically censored during COVID, and the censorship has eased up, but we know that all the machinery is actually in place. And so, how do we think about that? How do we spur even more the growth of things like Real America's Voice, independent media, and protect against potential future censorship? We know that it's now censorship by algorithm, and what does that really mean? And how do we protect ourselves going forward from the kind of propaganda and censorship that really made COVID happen?
Senator Ron Johnson, when he was first elected, I was working in far northern Illinois radio, so we had some Wisconsin penetration and talked to him a lot during that first campaign and during the reelection campaign. At some point, he had pledged to only serve 2 terms, I believe, and I'm thankful he perhaps has
He,
reversed
you
himself
know,
on that.
he didn't want to serve a third term, but I think
Yeah,
he felt really responsible because he was
yeah.
literally the only person in Congress who really engaged on the COVID vaccine injuries. And he understood that these people were just being completely silenced. And I'm grateful that he stayed.
Yeah, he's been fantastic up in Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson. More about the conference at chdconference.org. Mary Holland is president of Children's Health Defense. Mary, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Welcome back. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Steve and Ivy off this morning. Should be back with you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you being here with me and with Joel Griffith, who's a senior fellow at Advancing American Freedom. That's advancingamericanfreedom.com. Fantastic organization focusing on economics and law and policy and finance. Joel, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
You can find Joel over on X2 at Joel Griffith. Seeing last week the debt that we hold surpassing $40 trillion. And you and I have both been around for a while, and 20 trillion was bad in an emergency, and 30 trillion was bad in an emergency. I don't know what we call 40 trillion at this point. Is it a difficulty, Joel, because these numbers are not realistic for the average person to even contemplate anymore? When we talk about being $40 trillion in debt, how do you even get a handle logically on that situation?
You're right. These numbers are so astronomical, it's difficult. But $40 trillion divided by the entire population is over $100,000 of debt per person, close to $500,000 per family of four in debt. And the numbers are growing. If you look at the deficits this year and next year, there's no excuse to be running $1.5 to $2 trillion a year annual deficits. And beyond those big numbers, there's a real impact with the interest costs as well. We're spending close to $1.2 trillion per year on interest. So once again, if you divide that by the entire country, we're talking about upwards of $10,000 per family of four per year in interest payments. And I know many people will say, well, only half of all Americans right now are paying an income tax, and that's true. But even if you're paying little or no income taxes, you are still feeling the impact of that debt. The estimate is that because the government is competing with businesses and consumers for limited capital, that means every time you go to get a mortgage, anytime you look to buy a new car or to expand your business, you are competing with the federal government for those dollars. And like any other commodity, there's a price on money. It's called the interest rates. So when you look at the interest rates over the last year and a half, 2 years, those interest rates are going up, even though the Federal Reserve was supposedly lowering rates. They're going up because you're competing with the government for that capital. And that is adding about 1 to 1.5% to the interest rate, meaning if you've got a home, well, if you've got a $400,000 loan, you're paying an extra $5,000 a year in interest because your rates are higher thanks to the government's overspending.
So, Joel, we're overspending now by a couple of trillion a year, which makes it sound like pocket change. Of course, it's not. Just to stop digging the hole deeper, you've got to cut, 30% of spending? I'm just spitballing here. And then if you want to start lowering that, you've got to find places to cut, to run what we call a surplus, when you bring in more money than you spend. And as we look at what's coming down the road just 3-4 years from now, a Social Security crisis in which Social Security is going to run out of money, and people are going to say, well, we need to find more money to give people what they deserve, what they've paid into the program. There are not a lot of factors here that seem to be leaning us toward a path of fiscal responsibility. Do you agree?
I do agree, sadly. And you're very right. In order to balance the budget, we'd have to see the federal budget shrink by close to 1/3. I don't have any hope that politicians are going to do that, but we could avoid a crisis by at least making modest reforms to the entitlement programs. As you mentioned a second ago, those entitlement programs are what's driving us off the cliff financially. I know there was a lot of focus on Doge. Doge ended up saving $3 or $4 billion, which was virtually zero. Doge did not take us off this fiscal wreck. And there's a lot of focus on waste, fraud, and abuse. And we should focus on waste, fraud, and abuse. But guess what? Even if you were to eliminate all of the fraud in the government, you would only eliminate about 10% of the ongoing annual federal deficits. That's the low-hanging fruit. All politicians can easily agree, let's eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, and we should. But to really avert fiscal crisis, we have to address the entitlement programs. And as you mentioned, Social Security, the trust fund, is going bust. It's actually going to be fully drained in about 6 years. And what happens when that trust fund is fully drained? Then politicians have to make a decision. Are we going to raise taxes to pay for the entitlement spending? That's probably not going to happen. And that would cause economic pain. Are we
Hmm.
going to borrow more? Well, we could borrow more, but as we've seen, as you borrow more, then interest rates go up and up. Well, there's a third option, and this is the option I fear that Congress will do. You can simply get the Federal Reserve to print dollars to buy government debt to continue paying the benefits without raising taxes. But as we experienced during COVID over just a 2 year stretch, if you use the central bank to print dollars to buy debt, you end up with inflation in the future. We've seen prices rise by 30% over 5 years. That is going to look like a walk in the park compared to what will happen if politicians choose that third option to print dollars to fund entitlements.
Joel Griffith with us from Advancing American Freedom. Got about 60 seconds here, Joel. The other thing people will say is, okay, we'll cut foreign aid and military spending. That'll help get us on the right path. Can you compare quickly what we spend on that, say foreign aid, military spending, versus the amount of money and the percentage that is taken up by entitlement spending now and into the future?
Yes, well, in addition to making this world or a nation a more dangerous place if we reduce our military spending, that is not the driver of our federal debt. We are spending more on our interest payments
Mm.
than what we spend on our military each year. If you look at our total military spending relative to our economic output, it's about 4%. One out of every $25 produced in this country, or in terms of economic output, goes to fund the military. That number has been going down and down over the past 30 years or so. So, once again, this is an area people like to say, spotlight. Let's just reduce foreign aid. I'm not saying there's no foreign aid waste. There is. But eliminating that waste is not going to resolve our fiscal problem.
Joel Griffith is Senior Fellow at Advancing American Freedom, or at advancingamericanfreedom.com, a great organization. You can find him on X as well, at Joel Griffith. Joel, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's Joel Griffith. Scott Bertrand sitting in this morning on Daybreak. It's Scott Bertram filling in this Monday morning here on Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They should be back with you tomorrow. More at Steve Gruber on X and SteveGruberShow.com, where you can find more about the program, and also you could find podcasts after the show is done. Behind the scenes, doing a great job getting our segments up and ready to go. You want to hear that Joel Griffith interview again? Check it out. Share it with friends. Do the same thing via podcast or via video over at Rumble as well. This portion of today's program brought to you by PuroVet and Puro Clean's Veteran Initiative, which is the PuroVet program, investing in our nation's heroes by helping them own and operate thriving local businesses. 855 PuroVet or purovet.com. That's 855 PuroVet or purovet.com. The Freedom 250 Grand Prix in Washington, D.C. took place yesterday. Florida native Kyle Kirkwood, the winner there. President Trump waved the green flag to start the race. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy waved the checkered flag at the finish after 147 laps. First of its kind event at the nation's capital, drew a long list of sponsors and attendees, drew about 140,000 people for each day of the event this past weekend. I have nothing against it. I'm not a race car fan, NASCAR, Formula One. That's just not my thing necessarily. But I know Chicago also had the past few years this road track running through downtown Chicago. And now you've got something running through downtown Washington, D.C. It was funny to see some of the coverage, which of course had nothing to do with the race whatsoever. But stuff like, what was it? I think the Washington Post, had a story that essentially was people are concerned because the race is going right near the National Gallery of Art or Smithsonian, one of the Smithsonian museums. And they said, there's no evidence that these race cars going by at high speeds will harm anything inside the museum, but we can't be too sure about that. And maybe this is a bad idea to have the Freedom 250 Grand Prix so close to the Smithsonian Museum. I guess we'll find out today if any damage was done to things in the museum. I don't think it's going to be a problem. But again, they just don't like auto racing. That's just wasting fossil fuels, right? Yeah. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy. Hour 2 of Daybreak right around the corner. Stay with us.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now on Real America's Voice.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan. This is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning on Daybreak, this Monday, August 24th of 2026. And here are three big things you need to know. One, the U.S. has imposed 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of Canadian products after last-ditch negotiations failed to bring a resolution. Meanwhile, Canada's leader said he'll retaliate beginning in September. The dollar-for-dollar retaliation would target steel, dairy, appliances, agricultural equipment, pulp, paper, and electronics. 2, crews are battling a fast-moving wildfire in northwest Nevada that is prompting evacuations there. Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo has declared a state of emergency as the Hawk Fire threatens more than 1,000 homes west of Reno. The blaze has burned more than 10,000 acres since it began on Saturday. It is, as of yesterday, 0% contained. And 3, a Texas judge has rejected a request for a new murder trial for Carmelo Anthony, who's serving a 35-year sentence for fatally stabbing a fellow student during a high school track meet. Anthony's legal team had argued that he acted in self-defense when he stabbed Austin Metcalf during the April 2025 track meet in Frisco. That's where we start hour 2 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining us. Scott Bertram sitting in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. You can also find me at scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. Also the host of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, a weekly program on the weekends, many radio stations across the country, also available in podcast form. You can find me hosting Future of Freedom for Franklin News Foundation, Political Beats, a podcast for National Review, and also at our Patreon page for true music aficionados, patreon.com/politicalbeats, deep dives into the greatest bands and artists of the rock and roll era with guests from the world of politics. We just posted Eli Lake from the Free Press and our discussion about Steely Dan, which went about 3 hours long. They're deep dives, but they're really fun, entertaining if you're a music fan. Find that at Political Beats. You can find everything I do again at scottbertram.com. Coming up this hour, Frank DeVito is with us, author of J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party. Myron Ebel, senior advisor to the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. And then Alejandro Martinez Araiza, head of the National Food and Commerce Union, Mexico's leading labor organization. All that coming up this hour 2 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. We thank you for joining us and for being alongside today. Steve and Ivy should be back with you tomorrow morning on the program. Sunday shows didn't bring all that much excitement, except another battle between Kristen Welker and someone from the conservative side of the aisle. If you're heading on NBC or CBS at this point, so Meet the Press and Face the Nation, and you are a Republican, you should expect to be debating the moderator, debating the ostensibly nonpartisan moderator. In NBC's case, in Meet the Press, that's Kristen Welker. She had U.S. Senator Tim Scott on yesterday. Tim Scott from South Carolina, now the senior senator from South Carolina with the passing of Lindsey Graham, talking a bit about that South Carolina runoff and then what might happen in the general election and more, because Tim Scott, I think, is in charge of the NRSC. He's high up in one of those Senate organizations trying to get more Republicans elected to the U.S. Senate to retain the majority come November's election. And so discussion about that as well. And as I said, when you go on NBC these days, you should expect to debate the nonpartisan moderator. And that's what happened a bit here on Sunday. This is U.S. Senator Tim Scott and Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, Cut 5.
The NRSC continues to put out social media posts claiming that Abdul al-Sayed has quote-unquote terrorist ties, and yet there is no evidence that he has terrorist ties. Senator, should the NRSC stop running those ads?
Well, we know without question that he had family members who helped resource Osama bin Laden. We know without question that he campaigns with Piker, who said at one point that America deserved 9/11.
Let's stay focused on al-Sayed, though. Let's stay focused on al-Sayed and what he has said and believes in. There's
Birds
no
of a feather
evidence.
flock together.
Okay, now, did you see what she did there? Because she began by saying the NRSC is running ads saying Abdul al Sayed has terrorist ties. There's no evidence he has the terrorist ties, and should the NRSC stop running ads? So Tim Scott begins laying out the ties and saying he's friends with this person, his family did this. And so he's laying out the evidence about these ties. And what does Welker do? She changes the question in mid answer. Then she says, let's focus on El Sayed here and what he said and done. But that wasn't the original question. The original question was defend to Tim Scott the accusation there are terrorist ties. And so Tim Scott's doing that and saying, well, he's tied to this person. He's tied to that person, through family or through support or Hassan Piker. And Welker says, no. Let's focus on just what he has said and done. That's not the point of what she asked in the first place, changing the question midstream. Okay, this conversation continues for a little bit. We get to a point later on here. Cut 6, more from U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Meet the press with moderator Kristen Welker. Cut number 6.
Are Republicans trying to scare voters based on the fact that al-Sayed would be the first Muslim senator?
Not at all. What we're more concerned about and only concerned about is the positions he has spoken about. He's the one that said he was committed to Sharia law. No one else said that besides Abdul el-Sayed. He's the one that said he wanted to eliminate much of the national security apparatus that protects America. At the same time, he campaigns with Piker, who says America deserved 9/11.
And we should say al-Sayed did denounce that on this program. Al-Sayed did denounce those comments.
And he continues to campaign with them anyways. You can't denounce it with your words and do something different with your actions. We believe what you do, not just what you say.
All right, that's U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Thanks to our friends at Newsbusters for grabbing those clips from the weekend. This is the response, of course, from Democrats and people who spin for Democrats like Kristen Welker, which is, Sayed has said he doesn't agree with those remarks. Well, he's still campaigning with Hassan Piker. They're still best friends. You can say you don't agree, but then if you continue campaigning with that person, what does that actually say about what you believe? So, yes, anytime you go on NBC or CBS these days, Margaret Brennan on CBS had I don't have the audio, but she had Dr. Oz was on this weekend. And there was a back and forth. There was a fight there, too. It's not meet the press anymore. It's debate the press. The press will take the Democratic talking points. The press will take the side of the left and then debate you, Republican, debate you, conservative, on these Sunday shows. U.S. Senator Tim Scott did a nice job there with Kristen Welker and NBC. I still can't get over that first question where she says, defend your accusation that El Sayed has terrorist ties. And then Scott does and says he's tied to this person. His family did this. And then she said, no. Let's just focus on what El Sayed has said and done. But that wasn't the original question. She didn't get the answer she wanted. She changes the question. All right. Frank DeVito up next, author of J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party. That's up next here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy. One for the price of two, as I like to say when I fill in. They should be back with you tomorrow morning on the program. Frank DeVito with us. He is an attorney and author of J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party, which is out now. You can find it at Amazon.com and elsewhere. Frank, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Great to be here.
Appreciate it. So J.D. Vance out and about last week. We've seen him speak a little bit more often in these past weeks. He had a book out, so doing press tours there as well. Look, people got a good look at J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate, but sometimes the vice president has to assume the priorities of the president. This is the way things go. How would you describe J.D. Vance's political philosophy for someone who is relatively new to following, and how closely aligned is it with what you would call Trumpism?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first question, right? What is his core philosophy? The nice thing, and part of the reason that I wrote this book, is Vance leaves a trail, a pre-candidate trail. It's one thing once you're on the campaign trail and you're making speeches and maybe you're more inclined to do or say or align yourself to the voters and the issues of the day. But Vance writes some very candid op-eds and long essays and gives speeches in kind of the conservative intellectual movement before he's ever a candidate. So I think one of the things you get that's really at the heart of what he cares about for domestic policy is, how do we recover an understanding of and an accomplishment of the American dream that is not purely economic gain, right? It's not so much about, can we have a bigger house and more degrees and fancier cars than our fathers and grandfathers? And it's more about, how do we create a country where as many people as possible can get married, stay married, have a stable family, and raise children on an income provided from meaningful work. So, right, that doesn't give you particular, like, therefore, what is he going to propose on day one in the White House? But it gives you a pretty good sense, I think, about how he thinks about economics, success, and that whole framework. And then on the foreign policy side, I mean, I think there are, like you said, you have to adopt the stance of your president. So we're in a war in Iran, and Vance is, I think, doing what he can to be a loyal part of the administration. But I think if you look back, this is where I clearly see a little bit of a divergence between how Trump has acted, especially since Iran, and where Vance stands. Not that Vance is some full-blown isolationist, but, we see Vance was an early opponent of our involvement in the Ukraine war. And then before the Houthi bombing, we had that leaked signal message where Vance was the one who seemed to be standing alone among the important people in that conversation, asking, what are we doing here? So I think that's where I see the biggest difference maybe between Vance and at least part of the Trumpist MAGA movement, is on maybe a return to the foreign policy restraint, realism, whatever you want to call it, that I think a lot of people were calling for in the Trump era.
Frank DeVito is with us. His book, J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party. I want to ask you about one clip that's getting a lot of attention from last week, especially among conservatives, and that's J.D. Vance praising Huey Long during this rally. Huey Long, this very far left populist, believed in redistribution of wealth, high taxes on the ultra wealthy, and Vance is praising him in a way in his comments last week. All right, what do we make of this, and how do conservatives square J.D. Vance bringing in a guy like Huey Long into the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a clip at a rally, so I can't comment on the deep philosophical, underpinnings of what Vance is doing there. But I think you mentioned this in your intro, right? We have this problem that your average voter is not a political wonk who listens to TV, radio, right, and cares about philosophical, political issues. They're kind of kitchen table people, and understandably so, right? Most people tend to vote for the status quo when things are going really well and vote for something else when things are going really bad. And that's a huge political dynamic that we're dealing with right now and asking about as we head into the midterms and then 2028, right? That there's this huge block of voters throughout the Rust Belt and all over the country who voted for Obama, many of them twice, and then voted for Trump, many of them twice. And so I think that's the real, maybe non-ideological kitchen table swing voter. And so I think, again, I'm only guessing, but the Huey Long thing, people are clearly mad. People are clearly looking elsewhere, just because, again, even if you can lay the economic disasters at the feet of Joe Biden more than Donald Trump, right? Gas is $4 plus a gallon and groceries are expensive. So if you are just going to do the listen, follow the, the conservative political philosophy, it's working. No, I can kind of see why you would rhetorically want to go populist and right, have like sharp criticisms for the elites, maybe the elites of both parties. And that's kind of my best guess, is there's like a populist vibe that, helps the people know that you're not with the billionaires, you're with those who would want them to do all right. Huey Long is a strange example of that, admittedly, but that's about the best I can do with that.
Frank DeVito with us, his book on J.D. Vance. One of the big questions for Republicans is how to retain the Trump coalition who shows up to vote for Donald Trump at the ballot when he's on the ballot. When he's not on the ballot, there are some problems. We'll see what happens here on November 26th. Is one of the key questions about whomever the next nominee will be in 2028 for Republicans. Can this candidate hold together a Trump-like coalition?
Yeah, so there's always a sense in which the answer is no, only because Trump is a unique figure, right? We've never seen anyone quite like this. He captured a time when there was so much populist ire at both parties and their leadership, and Trump grabbed that. But that being said, I think there are a lot of coalitional dynamics, right? Different groups and who have come to the table and made up this MAGA dynamic. But at the end of the day, the biggest part of the shift that's happened, right, is the Democrat Party was seen as the party of the working class, and the Republican Party was long seen as kind of the financial, the wealthy, the billionaire, whatever you want to call it, class. And that shifted under Trump, right? The Republican Party has very obviously started to become the party of the American worker. So when you narrow it down to that, like, will Vance bring in every single, or the next 2028 candidate bring in every single Trump voter? No, there's always going to be a shifting dynamic, but can Vance especially keep the Republican Party as the party of the working class? Yeah, I do think so. And that's the fight.
Frank DeVito with us. His book, J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party, is available now, Amazon.com and elsewhere. Frank, thanks so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure, Scott. Thanks.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber this Monday morning, August 24th. Thanks so much for joining us. Scott Bertram filling in. Steve and Ivy should be back with you tomorrow on the program. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com. This portion of the program brought to you by Birch Gold. We are still a couple of months out, but the midterms, they are fast approaching. Make no mistake, if the House flips, it's a big deal for our economy. That uncertainty is one of the reasons to diversify with gold from Birch Gold Group. In the 3 months leading up to the 2024 presidential election, the spot price of gold jumped more than 12%. Why? It's a hedge against uncertainty. If you don't own gold, you could talk with Birch Gold. They'll discuss your goals and explain how precious metals can fit into your savings. They can even help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold for no additional money out of pocket. Text the word America to the number 989898. Get a free info kit and some solid information. The midterms will be here before you know it. Text America to 989898 and get a hold of Birch Gold. That's America to 989898. 9898. Scott Bertram sitting in here for Steve and Ivy on this Monday morning daybreak. Classes beginning this week here at Hillsdale College. We are excited to have new freshmen on campus and, of course, our returning students. If I can brag briefly here, I'm the general manager of WRFH, the student-run radio station here at Hillsdale College. Last week, we had two great pieces of news. One, Princeton Review named our little station here, WRFH, the 5th best college radio station in the country. That's our highest ranking in our history, which is only about 10 years here at Hillsdale College. So very excited about that. We also had three students named as finalists at the National CBI Awards. So we had a finalist for Best Documentary. We had a finalist in a few other programs as well. Best called Regularly Scheduled Entertainment Program. But our students do great work, and it's wonderful to see it recognized as such. So congratulations to everyone involved. Scott Bertram here on Daybreak. Welcome back. Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in on this Monday morning. Thanks so much for being alongside. Myron Ebell is with us, Senior Advisor to the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. Myron, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
There is a loophole that makes liquid natural gas permits reversible. We've heard a a lot about LNG over the past couple of years, first with the Biden administration doing all it could to prevent LNG from being exported elsewhere. And then now, Trump administration releasing some of those restrictions and the availability of American LNG flowing around the world. What's the problem here that makes permits reversible? That seems like a horrible precedent to set.
Yes, it's hard enough to get a permit for a major energy project or a mining project or an infrastructure project. You have to go through many steps, federal, state, and local. But the Clean Water Act was written in such a way that once a permit is issued for a Clean Water Act permit of a dredge and fill project, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, actually has the authority to veto that project, not only while it's being permitted, to veto the permit, but to do it after the permit has been issued, after the investments have been made, after the project is being built, and even after the project is in operation. So the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition is worried that a future left-wing administration, under pressure from the environmental movement, the climate blob, the preservation movement, will start vetoing projects that are actually already in operation, including pipelines, LNG projects, big mines, anything that can be made politically controversial by the mainstream media.
Now, people might hear and say, well, that probably would never happen. The EPA stepping in and stopping a project years after it's been approved, millions of dollars being spent, but it's already happened. 2011, West Virginia's Spruce Number 1 mine. Tell us what happened there.
Yes, a mine in West Virginia, a coal mine, was permitted under the Clean Water Act. It was the investments were being made, people were on the ground building it, and the Obama administration vetoed it. And this was upheld by the district court and the circuit court on appeal. And so the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition would look first to Congress for fixing this loophole or this oversight in the original Clean Water Act. But of course, Congress can't really do anything because the Senate is blocked from anything that is partisan. So our coalition is trying to convince the White House and the EPA to put this higher up on their agenda and get going on trying to not permanently, perfectly fix it, but to improve it, to put limits on the EPA's veto power through regulation. And so we don't think they're hostile to that idea. We just want to, as you know, the EPA under President Trump and Administrator Lee Zeldin has a very ambitious agenda, and they probably have already taken on more than they can get done in one term. But we're trying to put this up their agenda list so that they get going on it, because we're worried that if a Democrat is elected in a future presidential election, that they will start using this authority much more often because, as you know, the Democratic Party has drifted far to the left, especially on environmental and climate issues.
Myron Ebell is with us from the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. You were also President Trump's first EPA transition team leader, too. What did you learn in that transition process? And how much can a president, in this case President Trump, do to sort of root out some of the long-term left-wing administrators who might be littering the EPA?
Well, I learned a lot because I never worked in the EPA and I'm not an environmental lawyer. President Trump's first term was very ambitious in terms of regulatory reform, particularly at the EPA. But unfortunately, of course, everything that he got done or was in the process of getting done when his term ended and President Biden took office was quickly undone by President Biden. And this raises the problem of how much a regulation can do. So the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition hopes that a regulation will be started and finalized before the end of President Trump's second term. But of course, a future president can undo it. But it does take time. Once you've made a rule, gone through the process, had it litigated, then the next person, the next president who wants to undo it, has to go through the same process. So we think that it will give the chilling effect on investment and on companies that want to invest in America in big energy projects and mining projects, that chilling effect will be lessened if a rule is in place that has to be undone through the regulatory process. It takes several years. It could be litigated. And so lots of, it's not a perfect fix, but it's the best we can do until Congress starts working on actually passing laws again.
Myron Ebell with us from the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. We had entered the conversation mentioning this in the context of LNG and liquefied natural gas, but if I'm reading correctly, this could be for any project, including critical mineral projects. If we find minerals that perhaps we can use domestically as opposed to importing from China, this is another kind of project that this loophole could stop at its tracks. Is that correct?
Yes, any project that requires a Clean Water Act permit, a dredge and fill permit, a permit to dig up rock and soil and move it somewhere else, particularly when wetlands are involved, federal jurisdictional wetlands. Any project, a pipeline, a big mine, as you say, an LNG project, any of these can now be made controversial by the environmental left. Any fossil fuel project, any mine that digs up ground that is protected in some way, or that the left wants to have protected in some way, like if it's near the current one that people are worried about, and the Representative Pete Stauber of Minnesota, who's the chairman of the Energy and Mining Subcommittee in the House, is a mine near the Boundary Waters Canoe area in Minnesota. It's not in the Boundary Waters Canoe area, but it's near it. So the environmentalists and the preservationists are claiming, it will threaten the area because it's within shouting distance of well, it isn't within shouting distance. It's within several miles of the border of the Boundary Waters Canoe area. So that project, the Trump administration is trying to get it permitted as quickly as possible. It's a big mining project, and it could be vetoed in 10 years.
Myron Ebell is senior advisor to the Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. Something to watch here over the next couple of months. Myron, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it. Scott Bertrand filling in for Steve and Ivy. More of Daybreak right around the corner. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Welcome to your Monday morning as we get your week off on the right foot. Scott Bertram sitting in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com. Pleased and privileged to be filling in for Steve and Ivy as they're gone today. Should be back with you tomorrow. As I say, you get one for the price of two when I fill in here on the show. Hour 3 brings Chad Jones from the Guardian Angel Security. Also, Debbie Wuthnow from iVoter Guide as we roll into hour 3 of Daybreak on this Monday morning. A couple of odds and ends, things that piled up over the weekend here. Start with Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban, who is unafraid to be loud, unafraid to be wrong on some of his political points of view. I think he probably would, I don't know, you'd have to ask him. He'd probably qualify him as like a liberal independent, something. He'd probably say he's a guy, I'm just looking for good ideas. Whoever has really good ideas. But he ends up backing Democrats. He did an interview last week on a podcast, and you'll see it here in a minute. And our friend Western Lensman, the great X account, picked up on this. And so you're going to hear two parts of the same interview with Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban, of course, from owned the Dallas Mavericks for a time. I think still owns a minority part of the Mavericks. Also from Shark Tank, and made more than $1 billion selling his company back in the early 2000s, his tech company, which was streaming audio essentially. And Mark Cuban talking here about two different things. You're going to hear him first talk about how Democrats and leftists have ruined California. And then like 10 minutes later, same podcast, you're going to hear him beg Texans to elect Democrats to change the way Texas is run. There's a total cognitive dissonance here, that he can't understand that the way leftists ruin California is the same way they'll ruin Texas if they get the chance to govern. And I know that the race he's specifically talking about is a Senate race. This is James Tallarico. He loves James Tallarico. But he wants Democrats to be in power in Texas, too. So listen to this. You'll hear two cuts back to back. Mark Cuban first on California and then on Texas. This is cut number 2.
My daughter just graduated from college and she was asking about living in LA. I'm like, you can't afford it, right? The taxes are insane. But going back just to the billionaire stuff, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's going to cost them more than I'll say. And look, people say, well, you're a billionaire, right? Well, look, you're already getting people moving. You're getting companies moving. You could be cutting off your nose to slight your face. So everybody wants my money. And,
Right.
Unfortunately, usually they say they'll eat me last. James Tallarico, let's go.
Oh, okay. Tell me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a huge
Yeah,
fan.
I know you are.
I think he's honest. He's trustworthy. He cares.
What do you say then to those red voters?
Do what's best for the state of Texas. Do what's best for your wallet. Do what's best for you, right? There's nobody in the same thing. My buddy who voted for Trump in 2016, I say the same thing to all these voters. You've been voting for Republicans all these years. What have they done for you?
All right, there's Mark Cuban. Ask that same question about what Democrats have done for people in California. That is 10 minutes apart on the Pivot podcast. I think Kara Swisher is the host there that you heard, where he says Democrats have ruined California. They're overtaxing people. Young people can't afford to live there. They want to tax billionaires. You already have people moving out of California. Leftists have made it an impossible place to live. 10 minutes later, he says, elect James Tallarico. He's an honest guy. He's going to help the economy. The Texans have to do what's best for them, and that's by electing Democrats. People warn all the time. If you see, a lot of blue state people moving to a red state, they don't understand that the reason they want to move is the blue state politics. Then they want to import those blue state leftist politics to the new place they live, that they moved to because it didn't have blue state leftist politics. It's crazy. Speaking of crazy, I love this. My friend Christopher Scalia, who works for the American Enterprise Institute, also the son of the late, great Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. He caught this yesterday. This is from, I believe, NBC's coverage of baseball, Major League Baseball yesterday. And they have this sort of montage of Red Sox greats that they put in front of the screen as they're introing this game featuring the Boston Red Sox. And you can see, if you're watching with us, this montage on the right there, and you can see Wade Boggs and Ted Williams, and that's Jim Rice in the upper right, Manny Ramirez, Curt Schilling, I think it's Pedro Martinez, Carlton Fisk waving the ball fair in the World Series. Those are all great examples. Who's that guy all the way on the far left, full in this image full of Red Sox greats? You guys see that? If you're with us on video, that's Ted Danson playing Sam Malone on Cheers. If you're not familiar with Cheers, the great NBC sitcom of the 1980s, Ted Danson plays Sam Malone, and he is a retired former baseball pitcher who now runs a bar called Cheers. And so he is a Red Sox legend on the show, but not in real life. And so there are two possibilities here, as Chris Scalia laid out in his X post this weekend. One, either you have someone who really loves Cheers and sort of has this in-joke that they're going to include Sam Malone in this montage of Boston Red Sox greats, which is a long way to go to make fellow Cheers fans sort of happy. Or you have some lower level production assistants who probably went to AI and Chat GPT and said, make me a montage of Red Sox greats. And AI could not tell the difference between a real Red Sox legend in Ted Williams and Wade Boggs and a fictional Red Sox legend in the form of Sam Malone from Cheers. So there you are. That Ted Williams, Jim Rice, Manny Ramirez, and the fictional character from Cheers, all, legendary Red Sox players, according to NBC Sports from the weekend. I got a good laugh from that over the weekend, my friend Chris Scalia on X at CJ Scalia. Okay, more fun for us around the corner as well. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. You had another incident. We only have 20 seconds or so here. WNBA game last night in Chicago. One of the men, former NBA guys who was trying to be eligible for the WNBA draft, was attending the game. One of the WNBA players decided to shout at him after a basket. It seemed like it was unprovoked. And then he was ejected from the ball game. Still have to read a bit more about exactly what happened there last night. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy. We're both off today. Scott Bertram sitting in. Brock has a check of sports for us now.
With a look at sports, I'm Brock Palmbush. A full schedule in Major League Baseball yesterday. American League winners included Tampa Bay, the Chicago White Sox, and Texas. National League winners included Philadelphia, the Chicago Cubs, and San Diego. There was one NFL preseason game yesterday. The Tennessee Titans got past the Seattle Seahawks 19-16. U.S. Open champ Wyndham Clark birdied the last 3 holes to win the PGA Tour's BMW Championship yesterday at Belle Reef Country Club in St. Louis. Clark takes home $3.6 million with the win. The season-ending Tour Championship starts Thursday at East Lake Country Club in Atlanta, Georgia. In the WNBA, there were 4 games. Winners were Washington, Indiana, Dallas, and Las Vegas. Ryan Blaney won the NASCAR Dollar Tree 301 in New Hampshire for his 3rd win of the year. And at the Little League World Series, winners yesterday were Nicaragua, Curacao, Nevada, and Iowa. That's a look at sports. Back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Brock. Appreciate it. Also, a little sports addendum here. If you're wondering who won the local Hillsdale, Michigan Church Softball League this summer, well, right here, champion. 4-team league, and we had a team of Catholics. We had a team, I think 2 of them were non-denominational churches, and then our team was an amalgam of Lutheran, Missouri Synod Lutheran, which I am, and the Baptists and the Anglicans, and we came out on top in the playoffs on Saturday. So, I mean, fantastic. What a great summer it was to come away. No trophy as far as I know, just pride. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by the Wellness Company. This summer, we've been treated to reminder after reminder about the need for every American to take charge of their health. Every single day, there's another story about the limits of the state and federal government's ability to keep us safe and healthy. If the government can't keep you safe, how do you protect yourself and your family? That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You see and hear from TWC doctors all the time right here on Daybreak. You know that their products are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you and your family safe and healthy. The Wellness Company gives you the opportunity to make sure you are prepared for whatever happens with a series of prescription medical kits, an assortment of life-saving medications, and guidebooks to assist in the proper use. Go to twc.health/Gruber to order. That's twc.health/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber to save 10% at the Wellness Company.
I'm Shanola Hampton. Every day, millions of people
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy this morning on Monday's Daybreak, this August 24th of 2026. And here are three big things you need to know. One, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada is at war with the U.S. after trade talks with the Trump administration fell apart. U.S. tariffs against a wide range of Canadian goods went into effect early Saturday after negotiators from both sides failed to reach an agreement. On Saturday morning, Carney gave a speech to Canadians calling the U.S. terms a bad deal that America has changed. Number two, the top Democrat in the House and a top advisor for President Trump are reportedly looking for some common ground. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries recently met with President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in Manhattan, looking for possible areas of cooperation. Sources tell the New York Times part of the discussion focused on housing, immigration, and cost of living issues. And three, Republican U.S. Senate nominee Mike Rogers in Michigan says the state needs to enact a one-year moratorium on data centers. Rogers says he doesn't support a federal ban on the centers, but says Michigan needs stronger guardrails to protect community control, prevent utility price hikes, protect our water, and stop pay-to-play schemes. That's where we start hour 3 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber on this Monday morning. Scott Bertram filling in here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as the general manager of the award-winning student radio station WRFH. Also a lecturer in journalism. I teach in our journalism department and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can find wherever you get your audio or all corralled at podcast.hillsdale.edu. You can find me at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com. And as I say, most days I fill in. Just to be clear, when I host, I should say, I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the fine college I work for. It is a fun time, an exciting time here at the college because it's our first week back on campus with students. Classes begin Wednesday. I'll begin teaching Thursday. Everybody here over the weekend, upperclassmen and new freshmen, convocation yesterday as the freshmen get ready to go. It's as I said, exciting time of the year, and we're happy to have students back here on campus. Chad Jones with us this hour, founder of Garden Angel Security. Also, Debbie Wuthnow from iVoter Guide. We'll talk with her later on. I wanted to play a couple of sound bites from President Trump this past weekend. President Trump out rallying for his chosen candidate in the South Carolina runoff, which I believe is Tuesday, tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. This is just for the Republican side of things. Darlene Graham is the president's chosen candidate in a runoff since she got about 33% of the vote. Second place, around 22% of the vote in the first round. And so it's a runoff on Tuesday. President Trump out and about at a rally on Friday night. And not just talking about this particular race, but previewing some messaging that certainly will take front and center, will be front and center as we get closer to November. President Trump, Friday, South Carolina, communism and communist candidates, socialist candidates. He sees them as a big threat to the country. This is cut number 3.
But communism is the single greatest threat to our country in history, including World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, 9/11. And that's why we're going to crush the radical Democrats at the ballot box this November. And we're going to defeat communism in America once and for all. We're going to defeat it. It's never worked. It's dirty. It's filthy. It's unhappy. Did you ever see a happy communist? You ever see a communist laugh? I never saw it. I've known communists. They don't laugh. They're very unhappy people. We want to be happy. With your vote.
It sounds like a premise for a comic strip or a cartoon, the Happy Communist. President Trump Also warning about some of these far left radical candidates Democrats are nominating. Of course, you have Abdul Al Sayed here in Michigan, the socialist winning the primary on the Democratic side in Florida. She's running down there. Says if they win, you'll see a far left agenda and you'll see another round of impeachment. President Trump on Friday in South Carolina. This is cut number 7.
If we lose, you're going to lose your border. You're going to lose your tax cuts. You're going to lose everything that we've done. We've gotten the biggest tax cuts in history. Think about no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security for our seniors, no tax on overtime. All of that's going to be gone. Your taxes are going to go up. Your pay is going to go down. Your jobs are going to be lost. They're going to end up closing up. Your businesses are going to flee just like they did years ago. They're going to flee our country. I'm going to be impeached. They're going to impeach me. They have no idea why.
That's President Trump on Friday. And Tim Scott on Meet the Press yesterday at NBC, sort of furthering the argument, talking about some of the weird candidates who are running for office on the left this cycle. And many, are actually winning primaries and winning nominations. Tim Scott on Meet the Press on Sunday. This is going to cut number 4. Cut 4.
We are facing the most dangerous, radical, and frankly, Kristen, weird Democrats I've seen in my lifetime. Let's start in Texas. James Tallarico believes that God is non-binary. He's a person who's so out of step with Texans that we're seeing a coalition building around our candidate, Paxton, Republicans and Democrats and independents coming together to make sure that James Tallarico never sees the Senate floor.
We're going to talk.
Turn your attention to Michigan. Abdul El Sayed, the same kind of dangerous, radical, weird candidate. They're all over the country. We feel really good about where we are. And if you want to go back to Iowa, we have Ashley Hinson, a strong, powerful candidate running very strong in her state. And on the other side, we have Josh Turek, who has never seen a tax increase he didn't like.
Iowa's going to be a very interesting place come November, come Election Day. You have both that Senate race there and a number of these House districts. Midterm is historically a very bad time, especially midterm or the second term of president in power. A very bad time to be the party in power, a very bad time to be Republicans. President's approval rating, based on polling, and polling has been shaky, clearly, is underwater. And so the question is, where are these where are the vulnerable House seats? What can the Republicans do to retain them? If they lose the House, can they at least maintain control of the Senate? And this Michigan race is going to be a huge, huge factor in who maintains control of the Senate. Democrats need to flip these seats. If they lose one of their own in Michigan, well, that means they got to find somewhere else to win and then win another one to make up for the flip. So it's a big deal. And as I said way back in hour 1, if you were with us then, thank you for sticking with us. This could be President Trump's last big fight. If he wants the last 2 years of his administration to be anything close to productive, you have to at least have control of the Senate for judicial nominees. And if there's a Supreme Court vacancy, President's 80, he'll be 82 in the next presidential cycle, 86 4 years after that. This could be the last big fight for President Trump, his agenda, and his coalition. I hope he is ready. I hope he's up for the challenge, and I hope he gets his voters, his coalition, out to the ballot box in November. More Daybreak next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Jimmy Soul, born on this day back in 1942. Best remember for this hit, it's a good one. If You Want to Be Happy, would reach number one back in 1963. Later fell into, as many artists of the day did, drug habits. Was sentenced to 4.5 to 9 years in prison for a second felony offender in the 1980s. Died in 1988. Jimmy Soul, born on this day in 1942. If you want to be happy, he has some advice for you. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning on Daybreak. Chad Jones with us now, founder of Guardian Angel Security, new Michigan company dedicated to helping protect churches and other houses of worship. Chad, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
It is sad that this sort of product to this sort of company is needed, but if you look at the headlines and you see stories not just across Michigan but across the country, it's clear that there is a need for this sort of service. How did this idea develop for you, and how do you see this growing need across the country?
Started in 2025 with the Grand Blanc attack, and I have 5 years cybersecurity experience, so I looked at it differently than normal people. And I got to be honest, I went to church and I was looking over my shoulder. I was a little nervous and I felt ashamed. And so I wanted to do something. And that's when I come up with the plan for Guardian Angel Security. It took me months to come up with the ideas and to actually have a solution. You know, the Grand Blanc police were amazing in Grand Blanc. The response time was under 2 minutes, and their time to when they neutralized the subject was under 2 minutes. And that's like the best you can do. And that's where we operate in. I call that the chaos zone or the chaos window. That's where Guardian Angel wants to operate. And what we do is we take the chaos out of it. We have operational control. You know, when there's an event like that, a lot of people call 911 and there's confusion. And you have a dedicated, trusted source given one line of information. That saves time. Like if there is an attacker in the church, they don't got to get there, figure out who's injured. We're already telling them who's injured. We're telling them what area of the church they're in. They're not having to figure that out. All of them are precious seconds that can be saved and equate to saving lives. And there's also other defense measures that we have designed into play that can also slow the attacker down. And it takes it from chaos to organization in less than chaos. And that saves lives.
Sure. Tell us a bit more about the system that you've developed and the technology that's involved to help these churches and places of worship.
It's a 7-layer system. And it's 7 layers of security. Would you like me to name them and explain each one?
Sure.
Okay, well, it starts off with perimeter hardening. Like in Grand Blanc, I use Grand Blanc a lot. I live near there, and it was my case study for making this business. The guy drove his truck through the door. And one thing about our whole system is I don't want churches to feel like a military zone or so hardened that people don't want to be there. They got to be warm and inviting. The security is seamless. The people who go there won't see the security, but it'll be there to protect them when they need it. Kind of like a bank. You go to a bank and you don't see the security when it's needed. It's there. And so the first level is perimeter hardening, and we put balusters up in front of entryways that look like flower planters. They don't look like hardened balusters. And then you got entry control is the second layer. The third layer is compartmentalization, which is one of my favorites. We look at where the children are in the churches, and we design it with the point, if there's an attack, how do we seal that part of the church off? This is also designed to slow an attacker down and minimize damage. And then we've signed with a national white fog company. They've got 30 years in research and development, and they do large contracts, but they weren't working with churches and they want to work with us. And what that does is, in the event of a shooter coming in, this is deployed, and in 8 seconds, the shooter loses 2 things. They lose line of sight and they lose hearing. They cannot see to shoot no longer, and they can't hear where people are potentially injured. There's a loud decibel alarm going. The fifth is sensor and camera network. That's the fifth level. And then we got the sixth is undercover armed parishioners. That's like the agents on a plane, where we have an undercover agent on a plane. The church would establish that and have undercover armed parishioners in the audience. And then the Guardian Angel Command Center is the thing that ties them all together. They have the direct link with 911. They know who the undercover parishioners are. They have full operational control and can take chaos and turn it into a little bit more order and help save lives.
Chad Jones with us from Guardian Angel Security, New Michigan company helping protect churches and other houses of worship. Find more at guardianangelsecurityusa.com. We've got about 60 seconds left here, Chad. Tell us what you need to get going and what places of worship and churches can do if they're interested. guardianangelyusa.com. Guardian Angel Security.
We have a website.
Go ahead.
We have a website up online, and they can look and see what we do, and it explains it in a little more detail than this interview did. There's links for them to reach out to us. We're really looking as a startup. I want to roll this out on a larger scale than what I'm able to. I'm one guy, and this is a big problem. They say big problems take a village. I think this problem is going to take a nation's. And what I'm asking for, looking for a mentorship. I'm looking for community support, and them sharing my idea with their churches. I'm also looking for a potential investor that aligns with me, with Christian values, stuff like that likes this idea, and they're looking to do, bring this in a wider scale with me.
GuardianAngelSecurityUSA.com is where to find more about Guardian Angel Security. Chad Jones with us. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Off today. Should be back with you guys tomorrow. Happy to be filling in Scott Bertram. You can find me at Scott Bertram on X. ScottBertram.com is the website. Debbie Wolf now with us in about 5 minutes or so, president of iVoterGuide. We'll talk with her. I saw a clip over the weekend, maybe you did too, on social media, of a humanoid robot like running a 100-meter dash and then being unable to slow down, running into a barricade, falling backwards, and sort of cracking in half with sparks flying. Those humanoid robots are a little bit creepy. One of them, developed by a Chinese smartphone maker, beat the 100-meter world record held by Usain Bolt, which, are we supposed to be surprised by this? I mean, it's a machine. And I know running machines is different than a machine that makes, products or whatever it might be. But if you're developing a machine specifically to run fast, I don't see why it's a shock that you can build a machine that will run faster than a human. They're machines. China's state broadcaster reported Saturday, now it's a state broadcaster, so I mean, you take this with a grain of salt, I suppose, that the robot ran the 100-meter dash in 9.32 seconds. The robot, named Lightning, reached a peak speed of 14.5 meters per second during a test event for the second Humanoid World Robot Games in Beijing that took place on Saturday. The run beat the 9.58-second men's 100-meter world record set by Bolt at the World Athletics Championships in Berlin back in 2009. Now, first of all, that's 15 years, and Usain Bolt's record has not yet been broken. That's a pretty good run, especially since generally athletes keep getting faster, stronger in many areas. And then, yes, the humanoid robot able to knock it off by two-tenths of a second or so. But again, I don't. If you're building a robot specifically to be fast, you should be able to do that. Robots are going to be better than humans at many things. Not all things, of course. It's creepy to watch these things run, though, isn't it? Yeah. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning here on Daybreak. More coming up next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in as we dig back into the world of music history. Review what I fill in. Birthdays, death days, number ones on this day, etc. Number one, 41 years ago today, back in 1985. This one from Huey Lewis and the News, one of my favorite artists. I shouldn't say this, it's a security question. My very first concert ever was Huey Lewis and the News. Power of Love from Back to the Future. The filmmakers, Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg, wanted Huey Lewis to write a song for the film. It was going to be Marty McFly's favorite band. They asked Huey. Huey said, I don't really write for film, and I don't really want to write a song called Back to the Future. They said, don't worry, just send us whatever you're working on. And the very next song the band wrote with Chris Hayes, the guitarist, was Power of Love. Worked out pretty well for everybody involved. Went to number one on this day back in 1985. Joined now on the program by Debbie Wuthnow. She's president of iVoterGuide. Find more at iVoterGuide.com. Debbie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
You know, it's a lament I hear from voters virtually every cycle is they can't find a good repository with candidate information. So they're stuck Googling and trying to find this or that or a Facebook page. What is iVoter's Guide in trying to inform the public and voters about candidates this midterm election cycle?
Well, you know, voters need to know more than just the names of who's running. They need to know what they believe and what they will do with power. Information is at a drought. It's hard to find information, especially information that you can trust. And an informed electorate is really important. So iVoterGuide stepped into that space. And we are the nation's largest candidate research center, just equipping Christian candidates or faith-based, any candidate, really with what candidates have done, not just what they say they're going to do, with data-driven research, what they've done with money, if they've held office before, their legislative record, their votes on legislation, candidate questionnaires. And then we have an army of volunteers who comb through all that data and their Facebook page and their website and give you a rating of where that candidate lands on the political spectrum. So you'll know, do they lean to the left or to the right? And all the information is all there to support it. So you can go to iVoterGuide.com and know who you're voting for, what they stand for, what they believe, and be an informed voter when you go into the polls at iVoterGuide.com.
How long have you guys been doing this?
We started in 2008 in Texas, and in 2012, iVoterGuide went nationwide. So we have been a nationwide online free voter resource available since then. We've covered about 15,000 candidates every election cycle. So my team is just really in the onslaught of getting ready for the general election as we finally put the bow on the primary election, because we cover the Republican primary as well as the general election and every candidate in every race.
Over that time period, from 08 to present, have you found that it's tougher to get information about the candidates? Are candidates trying harder to hide their real beliefs, their true beliefs, what they do if they took office?
There's always an element of that. Even back, in the day, we find candidates that will scrub their social media. They will, take down posts they've had. They, will look for things on their opponent as well. So it is continuing to be hard. When we started covering school board races, which we don't cover all the local races, we do cover most of the state legislative races. But at the local level, we have to file freedom of information requests, sometimes even to get the list of candidates who are running. So certainly to get campaign finance at the local level, it takes a lot more effort. And it's just, that's why we exist, so that voters can have that information. Because the average voter, I myself, as a soccer mom, would never have done that and done that deep dive for digging. So iVoterGuide is there to help voters to know what the candidates stand for.
Debbie Wuthnow with us. She's president of iVoterGuide, iVoterGuide.com. Also find them on Facebook and X and Instagram as well. I know between the 2020 presidential cycle and the 2022 midterms, we saw a decrease in turnout, around 50 million voters or so. That's a steep decline. Do you attribute that in part, at least, to lack of voter information? Meaning there are people who say, maybe I want to vote, but I don't think I know these candidates well enough. I shouldn't vote based on what I know right now.
It's certainly an element of that. Honestly, Scott, we see that every cycle. So in the presidential election, on average, about 60% of voters participate. But every midterm, 2022, this year, it drops by about, the numbers are different, but about 20% of voters who just don't participate in those elections. Maybe only the presidential election gets their enthusiasm up. It could be a big part of don't know who I'm voting for. So I don't know, why would I show up when I don't know who the candidates are. So, but it is typical, and iVoterGuide is a solution that steps into that lack of information space. And hopefully we can keep those numbers as low as possible as far as those who stay home, because it's really important for our constitutional republic that Americans know who they're voting for, turn out to the polls, and cast their vote for the direction they want the country to go, be it on based on each individual candidate. And if you don't go, you're giving that authority to other people who have more enthusiasm or have information of the direction they want the country to go. So if you don't turn up, you're allowing others to choose for you.
What are those consequences if people stay home? People who end up voting then are what? Probably more involved, maybe a little more toward not the I don't want to say extremes, but toward one end or the other of the political parties out there. What does that mean for the candidates who eventually win those races?
Well, it's the results in every election depends not just on the candidates, but on the enthusiasm of voters and who's going to turn
Hmm.
out to vote. As you said, in the midterms, fewer people turn out. And so it's coming down to enthusiasm. We have seen a higher participation of Democrats just in the primaries this year. So if their enthusiasm holds through the general, that, bodes the typical result in a midterm election of the party that is not in the White House is the party that is more successful. So that is a possibility, but it's not a guarantee. The biggest factor is which group gets their specific voters, knocks on the doors, makes the phone calls, gets their voters to turn out at the polls, even in districts that, in a red district, the Democratic candidates can do that, and vice versa. It has happened. So it's a get out the vote drive, it's enthusiasm, it's what are the issues that you care about, and which party stands behind those, or which candidate stands behind those, and get out to the poll and vote for that specific candidate. But the impact is huge if even a small percentage stay home, because there are so many races that are decided on 1 to 2 to 5% of voters, which is thousands. So it can make a huge difference if that 20% of voters would participate instead of staying home.
Debbie Wuthnow, President, iVoterGuide, iVoterGuide.com. Take about 45 seconds here. Tell people, perhaps again, why they should trust the information that they find at iVoterGuide.com.
iVoterGuide is a Christian ministry, so we seek to be authentic and trustworthy. We gather all the data. You can see the sources for yourself. So we go beyond the spin and give you the facts about what the candidates stand for, what they believe, what they will do with power. We're used by millions of voters every election cycle because we tell voters not just who to vote for, but we give you the information to decide for yourselves. So go to iVoterGuide.com, get your free personalized voter guide, dive into the information, share it with your families and friends, because an informed electorate is the foundation of our constitutional republic, and iVoterGuide exists to equip you to vote wisely.
Debbie Wuthnow from iVoterGuide, iVoterGuide.com. Find them too on X and Facebook and Instagram. Debbie, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
It's Daybreak with Steve, Ivy Gruber, Scott Bertram filling in on this day back in 2021. The great Charlie Watts, drummer for the Rolling Stones. The drummer thinks he's dynamite, as Mick Jagger says here in the leadoff track from It's Only Rock and Roll, a great song called If You Can't Rock Me, one of Watts' signature drum songs, I think, with the Stones. Charlie Watts died on this day back in 2021. He was integral to the sound of the Stones, the way he played the drums, the groove, the pocket he set. Mick and Keith both said at various times, like, Charlie Watts is the Rolling Stones. Like, Mick and Keith wrote the songs, but man, that sound, that's a lot of Charlie. They, of course, have continued without him. He played on one track on the brand new album. They found some old tape of him playing, and so he is present on the new album, Foreign Tongues in one song. But Charlie Watts, fantastic drummer. One of my favorite Charlie Watts stories, drummer for the Rolling Stones. He married a woman in the mid 60s, just as the Stones were coming into popularity and getting really big. And the thing about Charlie Watts is he always would have preferred to be playing at a jazz club somewhere to probably 100 people in the crowd, as opposed to being in a big rock band. Now, I'm sure he enjoyed the money and had a very nice life and probably wasn't complaining to people, but he loved playing jazz. And he was married to this woman from a very young age, and I believe they were married until his death. And the story went that when the Stones were out on tour, and Mick and Keith went crazy and would go all around town, that Charlie basically preferred to stay in his hotel rooms. And if I'm not mistaken, he left hundreds of drawings of the interior of hotel rooms from all around the world, because as bandmates went out and partied and got crazy, Charlie would stay in his room and draw. He's an artist as well, and he'd draw the hotel rooms he stayed at over the years. Now, this is not to say Charlie wouldn't succumb to some of the temptations. He had a fairly substantial drug problem during the early 1980s, barely played on the Undercover and Dirty Work albums because he was in a bad way. The main reason the Stones didn't tour for Dirty Work in 85, 86 was because Charlie was not prepared to go out on tour. He got clean. Everyone came back for Steel Wheels in 89, and things went well past that point until his death in 2021. There you go. Probably more than you wanted to know about Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones, who passed away on this day back in 2021. I want to take a few minutes here. I don't usually do this, but I've got an open period here, and last second fill in here for Steve and Ivy today. They should be back with you tomorrow. Scott Bertram, by the way, filling in to talk a bit about Hillsdale College, if I might. And it's a very big week here on the campus here in beautiful Hillsdale, where our students have returned to campus. They came back over the weekend. New freshmen are here. Had freshman convocation yesterday. There's a great event at the president's house tomorrow night, President Larry Arnn's house tomorrow, where all the freshmen come out, and then the faculty is there as well. And Dr. Arnn introduces each of the faculty members to the freshman class. It's a great night. There's dessert served. It's one of the highlights of the beginning of the year. But all the students are back on campus, and I can't wait to have them back in the classroom again. I've been here at Hillsdale now for 10 and a half years, more than 10 and a half years. This is my starting my 11th year of teaching journalism here at the school, and it's an incredible experience. I am truly blessed to be here and also be surrounded by amazing, outstanding, terrific colleagues, some of whom you hear here on the program as I bring in people like Dr. Brad Berzer and Miles Smith and others to talk. It's wonderful to be here. Our students are incredible. You have to opt into being at Hillsdale, right? I mean, we have more applications than ever before, and that means our acceptance rate is lower than it's ever been before. And so we're very hard to get into at this point. And students who want to be at Hillsdale really want to be at Hillsdale and do the things we do here. This liberal arts curriculum, liberal arts education with a core curriculum, which means our students take a lot of the same classes. I think more than 50%, don't quote me, more than 50% of the course credits that students earn during the time at Hillsdale will be the same. They're taking the same classes for the core curriculum. And so students have similar experiences. They know what each other is going through as they're here on Hillsdale's campus. And our students are incredibly motivated to be the best they can be. they want to be they want to be involved in a number of things. They all want to be in leadership in these things. We have students who are here at the radio station and at the audio side of things, who also write for the Collegian, who are also involved in sororities, who are also involved in athletics, who are also involved in this. So our students' time, in addition to a very big workload when it comes to the academic side, they stay very busy during their time here on campus. And so it's wonderful to be here. If I can brag a bit, I mentioned this earlier briefly, but we had two great honors last week with the student radio station here, WRFH, where I am the general manager of the student run radio station and a lecturer in journalism. Our radio station here was named the fifth best college radio station in the country by Princeton Review, our highest ranking ever in about 10 years we've been here. The radio station's been here for 10 years. And three of our students were named finalists in national categories at the CBI Awards, College Radio Awards. Best podcast, best documentary, and best regularly scheduled entertainment program. That means our students are among the top 4 in the nation in those categories. So I'm very proud of their work, very proud of their effort, and it's great to see that being recognized by someone out. I always say, I can tell them they're doing a great job, but when someone outside the college says, you're doing a great job, that can mean a bit more to them. And the power of radio, I love this too. They'll be at the farmer's market, like downtown Hillsdale, and they'll ask, can I have this? Give me those onions. Someone will recognize them by voice. And it amazes the students that the power that radio has locally in a community here like Hillsdale. So, if I might encourage you, sign up for Imprimis, our newsletter. Take an online course at Hillsdale, because we want to educate not just our students here on campus, but Americans all across the country. Listen to our podcasts. Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, via Spotify, podcasts.hillsdale.edu. And the other thing is, as you very well might know, we don't take a penny of dollars, taxpayer dollars from the state or the federal government. And so we have tons of scholarships that help our students, make it possible for our students to be here at Hillsdale and support the operations. If you might find it to support us here, we'd appreciate that too. Hillsdale.edu for information on all that. Great to be here at Hillsdale College. More of Daybreak coming up next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Monday morning, getting your week off on the right foot. Filling in for Steve and Ivy, one for the price of two. They should be back with you tomorrow on the program. Always appreciate you sticking around with me as I guest host. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, ScottBertram, or scottbertram.com. Thanks to our guests on today's program. Mary Holland, back in hour one, president of Children's Health Defense. Joel Griffith from Advancing American Freedom. Frank DeVito in hour two, author of J.D. Vance and the Future of the Republican Party. Myron Ebell from Fix the EPA Veto Coalition. And here in hour three, Chad Jones from Guardian Angel Security and Debbie Wuffnow from iVoter Guide. If you missed any of it, if you want to hear it again, if you want to share with friends, check out the podcasts over at stevegruber.com or wherever you get your audio. Additionally, over at Rumble, you can find the video versions of these conversations this morning, too. And if you want to watch the show throughout the morning, do it there, too, at rumble.com. Search for Steve Gruber Show. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Patriots Relief. It is that time of the year. Back to school month is here. Everyone busy running around, soaking up the last bit of summer. Now it's time to get that familiar back-to-school routine. Whether you like it or not, summer's coming to an end, but don't let that get you down. Stay on task by incorporating Patriots Relief CBD into your daily back-to-school routine. Patriots Relief CBD products assist in the internal balance of the body, easing stress, anxiety, and ADHD, keeping students focused and stress-free, while parents and grandparents can enjoy watching the next generation flourish and grow while relaxed and pain-free. Patriots Relief CBD for a happy body and sound mind in this back-to-school season. Call Tim and his family now, 877-230-1776, or visit patriotsrelief.com. Use the promo code Gruber for 40% off. That's 40% off. And free shipping. Again, 877-230-1776, or patriotsrelief.com. Use the promo code Gruber at checkout. Thank you for being here this morning for Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Find me at scottbertram.com. You'll find me in the classroom this week as classes resume here on campus at Hillsdale College. Look forward to talking with you once again in the near future. Have a great Monday from all of us here at Daybreak.